Welcome back to the channel, guys. It is that time of year again, my favorite time of year, pre-spawn smallmouth fishing, and today we're gonna be using one of my favorite baits for smallmouth bass, and that's gonna be the finesse swim bait. Today we're gonna talk about everything you need to know about this bait, how to catch more fish on it this spring so that you can catch a bunch of smallmouth on your local lake, river, creek, whatever, using this technique as well. It'll work for spotted bass and largemouth as well. Truly, this is just a bait that fish cannot resist, especially smallmouth bass. So we're gonna go through everything you need to know today. We're gonna go out on the water, fish it. Hopefully we'll catch a couple fish, so stay tuned and let's get right into it. So for starters, let's talk about your rod, reel, and line setup. This technique is the simplest technique that you could ever fish. If you're just getting into fishing, if you know someone that's just getting into fishing, you're trying to get them into it with you, take them out there when these fish are feeding, spring and fall, give them one of these baits right here and tell them to cast it around and they'll fall in love with fishing forever. It is such a fun way to fish. They're aggressive, they bite it hard, they fight hard, and most importantly, you catch a lot of fish on it. So my rod and reel setup here, Cashin core spinning rod. It's just a 7-foot medium fast action, your basic spinning setup. Again, if you know someone that's new to fishing, probably going to use a spinning setup to begin with. So this is going to be the technique that you can do on that spinning setup. I also fish it on a bait caster. I have two topwater and jerkbait rods, the Icon versions, and I'll put 12-pound test straight fluorocarbon on there on a bait caster and I'll fish it on that. But I have two jerkbaits on those for the day because we're fishing for some pre-spawn smallmouth. So I also got some jerkbaits on those. So we're gonna be using the spinning setup today and show you how effective it can be with a spinning rod. I fish a 2500 series Shimano Sedona. I put 15-pound test lime green braid on it, and we'll talk about why that's important while we're actually fishing it out there. And then lastly, I just use an 8-pound test fluorocarbon leader. I put about 10 foot on there so the fish don't see this lime green braid, and you're good to go. So now when it comes to the actual bait itself down here, I keep it really simple. Color-wise, I use 2 colors, and swim bait-wise, I use 1 swim bait, but you can use whatever you like. There's Kitex out there, there's all kinds of finesse swim baits. Anything that's about a 3 to 3.5 inch swim bait that swims really well at low speeds, that's gonna be perfect. And what I mean by that is your bait needs to be soft. It has to have a very soft plastic to it so that it'll swim on those very low speeds while you're reeling it. I use the 6th Sense Divine swim bait. I use the 3.2s for smallmouth the most, but you could use a 3.8 as well if you wanted to get some bigger bites. I really find that they love this 3.2 and it just gets me a ton of bites and I catch a ton of fish doing so, and I'll still catch big ones on it. So, and then when it comes to colors, I truthfully only have 2 colors in my entire boat, but you can fish any of them. They're all great colors. Whatever matches the forage in your lake is going to be great, or pond or whatever. Like if you don't have shad in your pond, a bluegill color might work better, and they have bluegill colors that you can choose from. But I fish 2 colors. One, if the water's really clear, which we're on a lake that you probably got 4 to 8 foot of visibility today, I'm gonna use this Pro Blue color. It is absolutely amazing. It catches a ton of fish. It's very natural, has a little bit of flash to it on a cloudy day like this where the sun's kind of peeking through. That little bit of flash can draw them in from a distance. And then Ghost Ice Minnow. If that water is a little bit more stained, you need something stand out a little bit more, that solid white color really stands out and will catch a bunch of fish in that dirtier water. But those are the only 2 colors I throw. So far you need a spinning rod, which you probably already have, and you need a couple packs of swim baits in your favorite colors. Those are the 2 colors that I use, so you could get away with 2 packs of swim baits right there. Lastly, you need a jig head to fish these things with, and this is my jig head of choice right here. This is going to be the Pulse Fish Matt Airy Finesse swim bait head. This thing is awesome. One, it's going to have a Gamakatsu hook in it. It's the same hook that I used to pour in my ball head jigs, but this swim bait head has a couple more features over your basic ball head jig, and that's why I like it so much. So you have your strong but light wire Gamakatsu hook. That's key. You need a strong hook, but it needs to be very light wire and sharp so that it penetrates those fish's mouth. You don't really need to set the hook on these. You almost reel in and do like a sweep set. So you need a very sharp and fine wire hook, and oftentimes you'll get this thing snagged on the bottom. So if you have a light enough wire hook, you could bend that out just a little bit, get your bait back, and keep fishing. The other 2 things that this swim bait has that is very helpful when you're fishing this technique, one, has a little bit more realism. So these fish are going to look at this bait. They're going to get a very good look at it, especially in clear water. This has the eyeball. Sometimes I feel the eyeball just helps just a little bit more over just a plain lead head jig, especially if everyone's throwing it. Just a little bit more realism to your bait can help. Not saying it's going to catch you more fish, but something, it just kind of helps a little bit. It also has a big keel on it. It's different than the ball head jig, so it's going to keep your swim bait upright and swimming through the water naturally. And lastly, my most favorite part about this swim bait head, the spring lock keeper on here. I've been fishing spring lock keepers on bigger swim baits for a while, offshore, deep water, largemouth on some bigger swim baits. It keeps those swim baits on forever. You never lose your swim bait. And when I fish these finesse swim baits, you go through packs and packs of lures because those ball head jigs don't really have a good keeper on there. Now you can get one with a spring lock keeper, and you just wind that up on your hook, and we'll show you how to rig one up out there on the water. You just thread that thing up on there, you get to casting. Every time you catch a fish, you just take it off, drop it in the water, get back to casting. You can catch multiple fish on one swim bait. It's gonna keep your cost lower fishing this bait. You're gonna have a lot more fun. You're not gonna have to keep re-rigging all the time. You just keep fishing, keep catching fish, having a good time. So let's head out on the water. We're gonna talk about how and where you wanna fish this thing. Hopefully we'll catch some fish along the way. Now that we talked about how to rig up the swim bait, everything you need to know about your setup, now we can get to the fun part, which is catching some fish. So let's throw this guy around and see if we can catch us a couple. What we got here, this is a wind-blown bank. We got winds from the south today, so it's blown in up on this north bank here. We're looking for just areas that these fish could be feeding and getting ready to spawn. So there's a lot of big chunk rock down here, a lot of big boulders, crazy stuff. There's even some wood. There's some boat docks. Haven't seen any fish on live scope or bait yet, but sometimes you just got to fish around and see if they're there. All I'm doing with this, I have a 1/4 ounce weight because I'm fishing in like 10 foot or less, probably even shallower than that. I'm casting up there into 0, and I'm gonna reel it down this bluff wall or this steep bank back down to my boat's sitting in 20. So I'm fishing probably 5 to 15 foot is gonna be the key area up there. And all you're gonna do with this, you have your lime green braid. So I'm gonna make a far cast away from the boat. And this is as easy as it is. I let it sink down to the bottom. It's hard when the wind is blowing, but you can watch that lime green braid. I know my line just laid slack on the water, and I'm just gonna slowly retrieve this back, and I want it bouncing into the rocks and everything down there on the bottom. If you get hung up, you can kind of bounce it off a little bit. And I just missed one right there. And if you get out of those snags, there's one. Okay, we already got one hooked up. Oh, and he came off, no. Okay, so I didn't have my drag set right on that one. We got chaos going on. I just had 2 bites in a row up here on this chunk rock. So we set the drag right this time. We got it a little bit tighter so we can penetrate that hook. We make sure my line's on the bottom, and we're just gonna slowly bounce it off these rocks down there. And if you get hung up, you can shake it off. Sometimes you'll get snagged in there pretty good. You might actually have to go up there and get it, or ultimately you're gonna lose some of these jig heads, but that's the way it goes. It is simply though, put this thing up there where you think the fish live, get in areas where you think there should be some fish, and just slowly wind that thing back to the boat. The slower you can reel it, the more bites you're gonna get. If you can keep that thing on the bottom, bouncing off those rocks, you're gonna get way more bites than you would if that thing's off the bottom. So I stopped reeling there and I saw my bait was way off the bottom. I let it sink back down there, and I'll start a slow retrieve again, and I'll reel it back out that shelf a little bit, and I'll kill it. Now it landed right back on the bottom again. I watched my braid lay slack immediately. So I'll go ahead and just start reeling slowly again, and that's all I do. I literally just watch my line to make sure my bait's on the bottom, and if it's not, stop reeling, let it sink back down to the bottom. If it is, keep reeling slow, and that is all it is to it. Just reel slow, nice, slow, steady retrieve, and you'll catch a ton of fish doing it. So I'm watching my line, I'm on the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and start my retrieve, nice and slow, missed one there. Go ahead and let it sink back down. A lot of times these smallmouth get in little wolf packs and they're pretty aggressive. So they'll just come up and slap at the bait, and they might not actually get the bait in their mouth. So if you keep reeling, sometimes if you miss one, they'll come back and get it because there's more up there where that one came from. So we'll keep winding this thing around, and we're gonna see if we can catch us a couple of fish today. Like that right there. And it's a nice one. Oh, that's a big girl. Oh, that was awesome. I love this technique so much. If you have been watching my channel, you already know that. If you haven't, now you know why. Open your mouth. Got you. Look at that smallmouth. What a beauty. Oh my gosh. So that is a dandy smallmouth right there. We just got 2 bites off this windblown bank. There's a little rock point right here that's sticking out. They were kind of actually tucked on the back side here, suspended up in the water column. I was just slowly reeling it. It actually was going on the bottom and started to leave the bottom. As soon as it changed direction, popped it and was swimming towards me, kept reeling, get tight with that fish and just swing into it, and you get some big smallmouth like that. That is a tank. Let's get catching some more. It's getting chilly. Take all my gear off and then it gets cold. There we go. Little guy. He's just a baby. But it's another one. Swing him up on in here. And you'll see, maybe, you'll see that swim bait gets him right in the roof of the mouth. That hook is nice, sharp, penetrates good. You can go ahead and pop him out. And the nice thing is, the reason we're fishing that spinning reel today, besides having a jerk bait on those other rods, is that we're fishing in some deeper water. So I want that swim bait to slowly work its way down. This has a 6:2 gear ratio. We're gonna go ahead and let him go. Where my bait casters have a 7:4 gear ratio. So I would have to reel even slower, and I'm already not reeling slow enough to get enough bites. The slower I've been reeling, the more bites I've been getting. So having that slow gear ratio is key to getting a lot of bites. This swim bait's been on here for a while, so he's toast. We're gonna get another one. We'll show you how to use this screw lock jig head to keep your swim baits on all day. I probably could have got another fish out of that. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna grab us one of our divine swim baits. So we have our divine swim bait here, and then we have a little spring keeper. What we're gonna do, I've measured this plenty of times, but I like to measure it up first. So I know that my hook needs to come out of the bait right about there. So all I'm gonna do is center this up as perfect as I can. You want the swim bait as straight as possible going on here. And there's a center line that runs down the middle of these divine swim baits. So I'll put it right in the center of the head, run it right down the center line until I come out right where I marked that hook to come out. If you're a little short or a little long, that's okay. I'll show you in here in a second. And then you're gonna push it till it touches the spring lock, and you're just gonna twist, run the tail around, twist, run the tail around, twist, run the tail around, twist it again. Now you can see I'm all the way up next to the head and my swim bait's a little bit crooked. You can just go ahead and tear a little bit of the plastic. It'll straighten right out and you're good to go. And it's on there with that spring keeper, so that's not coming off. So now we're set up, ready to catch another one. Let's get one more, see if we can catch us another big one. There we go. He crushed that. That was awesome. Right there on that point, he was just sitting there staging up, probably gonna go back in this pocket and spawn here shortly. He is not a big one, but that is how you fish a finesse swim bait, and that's why it's such an excellent technique to catch pre-spawn smallmouth bass. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did want to see even more smallmouth bass fishing with this bait, go ahead and check this one out right here. Hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.